Omaha preview show from D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney, joined by the great Kendall J. Rogers, the even greater Aaron J. Fitt. I'm not pretty sure that J is not the middle initial of either of these gentlemen, but we're going to run with it. Before we get started, boys, let's say thanks to our presenting sponsor in the postseason, which is Wilson. If you are in Omaha this week, you need to come to the Omaha experience in the baseball village over here right by the stadium. The Wilson store is here. Imagine 4 of your favorite baseball brands under one roof. Wilson, D. Marini, Louisville Slugger, Evo Shield. It's like being a kid in the candy store. So if you're not in Omaha, make sure that you're following along with us at D1 Baseball throughout the next 10 to 12 days. Plenty of new releases coming out from Wilson as well. So we're very appreciative of our friends at Wilson. They will be our presenting sponsor the entire postseason. So, boys, we are going to get after a little preview session here. How are we feeling being in Omaha, Fitzy? Are we settled in yet?
Yeah, I'm fired up, especially, getting here and checking out these gloves, man. This is pure fire behind us this year. I love the glove game from Wilson this year.
Do you guys remember your first glove as a kid, who the autograph was? Mine is embarrassing because I was an infielder.
Yeah. I cannot remember, actually.
Okay, mine was Catfish Hunter. I was playing second base with a Catfish Hunter glove, which I'm pretty sure he was just a pitcher. So anyway, that might explain some things. So what do you say, boys? Should we jump in here? So what we're going to do is we're going to preview the 8 teams, talk about, what makes them, why they're here, what could enable them to do some damage while they're here, who are some key players, and then we'll go left side of the bracket, then right side of the bracket, and then we'll pick our teams on either side of the bracket. So I'm going to go in reverse order here. Fitzy, why don't you kick us off with Notre Dame? We'll start with the left side of the bracket.
Yeah, this team is a whole lot of fun, Runes, and they just, shocked the world, if you will, down there in Knoxville, and it feels like a team that is built to win here in Omaha because they're old. We've talked about that a lot, but it's not just that they're old, Runes. They're so well coached and they're good. Okay, like that's the part that I think gets overshadowed with Notre Dame. Everyone talks about the experience, about the approach, but they're also talented. I know that maybe there's not a lot of top prospects in this lineup, but I mean those guys can hit. And they really play defense. I mean, I look at a guy like Zach Preisner, the shortstop. To me, he's like the classic glue guy. He makes all the plays defensively. He's come up with a lot of big swings here in the postseason, really all season long. They've got a lot of guys like that, Brooks Coatsy and Carter Putz, and these David LaManna, who's been there forever. I mean, all these guys, not only are they mature, but they're just winning players who help you on both sides of the ball. And so this is a team that does not rely too much on the home run. I think they'll come to this ballpark, they'll be able to wear out the gaps, they'll be able to have a mature approach against whoever they face, whether it's Pete Hansen for Texas or whoever. It just feels like a team that they're going to be ready for the moment, and they're built for this ballpark.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of adjust their style of play to whatever ballpark they're playing at, and I think they're one of those teams coming into this tournament that if they can beat Tennessee and Knoxville, they're going to think they can beat the Yankees. So they're dangerous.
Yeah, my favorite stat on Notre Dame is that you figure you're going to put 10 people on the field, right? 9 position players and a pitcher, and 9 of those 10 kids are graduates. John Michael Bertrand has got 3 degrees. When you think about college degree, graduate degree. And so, there's all these rumors about Link Jarrett and Florida State, but for these kids, they're leaving too, right? They're looking for a job just like their coach is looking for a job. So I think that's really neat. Fitzy, I love what you said about their style of play. They're one of these unique offenses where if you're just throwing cookies to try and get ahead in the count, they will bang it. But then they'll also extend the at-bat 8, 9, 10, 11 pitches. I think Notre Dame's a very uncomfortable opponent. And to your point, Fitzy, I think their style, fits anywhere. I mean, they just beat a historic team in, a very hitter-friendly park. But I think their style will apply really well here, too.
And I would add this, too, because I think the 3 of us, we always find ourselves talking about Notre Dame's offense and defense, the position player group. Mm-hmm. But if you look at these 8 teams in Omaha, Notre Dame has the best staff ERA. They're actually a really good pitching team. Starts, of course, with Bertrand, who's one of the great stories in college baseball. I was talking with Matthew Marshall, who's now the ace at Wofford this year, and he was teammates with Bertrand at Furman. They're both, kind of refugees when that program got cut. But he was telling me Bertrand got cut his freshman year at Furman. You know, he didn't make the team. He stuck around, he battled, he turned himself into a guy, and now he's, you know, an All-America caliber ace for an Omaha team. I mean, it's just a really neat story, but he's really good, man. I mean, it's 4 pitches wherever you want it, competes his tail off, really knows how to pitch.
Yeah.
I mean, he's as good as it gets.
Yeah, you know, and if you're like a baseball coaching person, like you'll enjoy Notre Dame. It's a very cerebral style, so that's going to be fun. Kara, why don't you take us to Texas? Talk about the Horns.
Yeah, I mean, I think Texas is one of those teams, like coming into the season, one of the big storylines obviously was Ivan Melendez deciding to come back for another year. Tristan Stevens, you know, deciding to come back for another year. And I think the biggest thing for me when I look at Texas, we know how good they're offensively, you know, they are offensively with Melendez and Murphy Staley and guys like that. But I look at Tristan Stevens and the way that he threw in Greenville is like a big key to the weekend because, you know, he's one of those guys that his first 2 outings at Greenville, he wasn't very good. But, you know, this third one, he puts together a really good start. And I think for Texas, you know, kind of going to CBS, it all kind of depends on what he does. Like if he comes in this tournament and pitches the way he did in Greenville, I think Texas not only can win the bracket, I think they can win the national championship. But, you know, he's one of those guys the last 2 months of the season, honestly and truly kind of struggled. And so what we get out of him is going to be really important. And I think the thing about Texas, too, is that lineup top to bottom is really good. I mean, Dylan Campbell last weekend in Greenville, you know, had some big hits for him. Doug Cotto has a really good approach. He works a lot of counts. You know, Eric Kennedy's finally healthy, able to play. And so Texas is really deep top to bottom. Troy Tulowitzki in that offense, they're gonna pressure you. And it all kind of depends on what they can do on the back end of the bullpen. But it all really, for me, hinges on Tristan Stevens. And I hate to put it on one guy, but, like, you know, outside of Stevens, like, who do you really trust out, you know, besides him, Lucas Gordon and Pete Hansen? I don't know if I really trust anybody.
There's a lot of really good arms in that bullpen. There's a lot of velocity. There's a lot of stuff that they can run at you. I'm curious to see how they're going to structure it, you know, especially if they can stay in the winner's bracket. Do you kind of use Stevens in that bullpen role? In Greenville, they used him, you know, out of the bullpen the first 2 days. Didn't go very well. Third day he starts, you know, and they needed it in the winner-take-all game, and he was great. So he is a wild card. But the other thing for me is, you know, Hansen and Gordon need to be better than they were last week. I suspect Hansen will bounce back. I mean, David Pierce even said last week, look, this is probably the worst he's been all year. You know, Pierce was pretty blunt about it. That's not your normal Pete Hansen. I have a feeling he's going to bounce back strong. But the other thing about Texas is you're right. They're a great offensive team. They lead this field, this Omaha field in home runs, which you think, okay, like that's not necessarily a great fit for this park.
But what happened?
But they also lead this field in doubles. You know, and that's something I always look for. Doubles win here. And so I feel like they're going to be able to adjust. But it's a very right-handed lineup, guys. And, you know, Kennedy's the only lefty, really, that you'll see. He doesn't necessarily even start every game. So if you've got a good righty, you can spin a breaking ball. It still feels like, on paper, that should be the vulnerability here. But it's easier said than done with these guys. They are very mature.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, too, I didn't mention him, but Skylar Messenger, the Kansas transfer. You talk about a guy who's had a great year. I mean, he had a good average last year at Kansas, but didn't have a lot of power. I think he might have had 2 or 3 home runs last year for the Jayhawks. You know, he's in double-digit home runs as well. So he's up to like 375 with double-digit home runs. So they've got 3 guys that, you know, have double-digit home runs that can wear you out from a power standpoint.
And Messenger came up with a huge swing in that super regional. This team is talking about your point about their maturity and their approach. They're so smart, and you know they saw Runes, like you've been saying all postseason. That ball flies out to right center field, and that day in particular, the ball was really carrying there. So they had a bunch of guys going oppo. And he came up with a huge swing, 3-run home run to the opposite field. Just kind of a sign of a mature guy who's you know. And Dylan Campbell did the same thing. You know, they really did a good job with that.
That's the one thing I really like about this Texas team too is if you look at that super regional at Greenville, you know they're down what 7-2. East Carolina fans can start to feel it. East Carolina players can start to feel it. And all of a sudden, like boom, even in an atmosphere, you know, hostile atmosphere, like they just come back, boom, 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 win the game, force a game 3 and win it. So it kind of gives you an idea of just the mentality of this team.
Yeah, I love their toughness, right? Like you're the preseason number 1, you lose Tanner Witt. It's been like a horns down-a-thon, right? Like everybody horns down in Texas face all year, and these kids have not blinked. You know, they've just been taking punch after punch, and so it's Ivan Melendez. You guys know I love outrageous comps. I'm going Miguel Cabrera on Ivan Melendez because you know it's like he's not just a big strong kid anymore. He's a big strong kid who can hit and uses the middle of the field. So Texas is fun, and it's an elite defensive team. Really, really talented defensive team.
Lead the country in fielding percentage.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about our D1 Player Society guy, Trey Faltini.
That's right.
He's a big key, too. He had a home run in Greenville and certainly a premier middle infielder for the Horns.
And he hides down there in the 9-hole, and there's a lot of swing and miss there, but he can hurt you. I mean, he's got, 15, 16 home runs now. I mean, he can hurt you down there.
Yeah, they're going to be fun. They text us to me to put a bow on them. They just feel like they belong here. This feels like this is a very comfortable experience for that program. So obviously 38 appearances in the College World Series.
And we're here last year, which matters too.
Yep, certainly does. Fitzy, why don't you take A&M?
Okay, I mean, this is the one, Runes, that I got to wear it a little bit because I think you and me both. We've been picking against the Aggies
for like a decade. I feel like right now.
All year long. Yeah, hate the Aggies. No, they've won us over gradually.
Mm-hmm.
We still, we've held on to that skepticism because of the defense, right? Like that's the one thing that I keep worrying about because they're not a very good defensive team. I think they're fielding 967, which is by far the worst in this field. You compare that with Texas fielding 987. It's a little jarring.
Yeah.
But you know what? It doesn't matter. They just win. They just go out there and win every week. They grind out at bats. It's crazy. I mean, that Louisville game, the series was just like such classic A&M baseball because it was the epitome of a slog, and they're just wearing you down, working counts. They're so disciplined. They're so well coached, and they've gotten the most out of that pitching staff. And you've talked about the emergence of Nathan Detmer as a star. That's a huge key, obviously, for them. But it feels like they've got more in the bullpen than maybe we expected too, with Jacob Polish being a huge addition as a transfer from Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for A&M is that, Detmer the last, few weeks has really struggled. And, Micah Dallas has kind of been hot and cold. But, if you look at the bullpen, Will Johnson's developed into a big-time reliever. Joseph Menifee, if you remember the first half of the season, was awful. He's been really good the last half of the season. Then Jacob Polish on the back end has been really good too. And so, when you look at those pieces in the bullpen, they're one of those teams that, they only need their starter to go 5 innings. I mean, they haven't had a starter go past the 5th inning since, April 28th. And so, and they continue to win. So they can turn things over to the bullpen. And this format really helps them because they can throw Menifee, Polish, and all their best relievers in every game because they get a day off the next day. So that really kind of suits them. I think the biggest thing for A&M, though, is when you look at their offense, they take a lot of pitches. Jared Poland last weekend, Riley Phillips last weekend for Louisville. They were both in 65 pitch mark in the 4th inning, 3rd inning last weekend. So they're going to take a lot of pitches. If you like quick games, you may not want to watch A&M because they take a ton of pitches, easily the first pitch every at bat. But, you look at Dylan Rock, Trevor Warner's kind of been hot and cold, but he's a guy that can be an enforcer at the top of the lineup. And, Michael O'Reilly's done a phenomenal job. I mean, really, this whole coaching staff's done a great job. When you look at the evolution of the bullpen with Nate Yeske, you look at the offense of Michael O'Reilly, this was an offense that guys hit 260 last year. Now they're one of the better offenses in college baseball. And kind of the last thing on A&M is, if you're going to beat them, you almost have to deliver an absolute haymaker. And, and even at that, granted, these teams aren't South Carolina, but South Carolina had 11-1 lead on them in the series finale. And A&M scored, 13 runs in the 8th and 9th innings combined and beat them. So, I mean, you say you can deliver a knockout punch, but can you really,
So interesting. I think, to your point, Kendall, the position player group for A&M is really fun. Dylan Rock is a fun player, UTSA transfer, just really physical, but there's hitting skill there. He runs good at bats. It's kind of, we don't see teams taking first strikes very often, modern baseball period. But it's kind of genius because now umpires are being graded on the TrackMan system. And so it feels like the strike zone has shrunk. So I almost feel like A&M might be ahead of the curve there a little bit. So now, again, they're going to face some really good strike-throwing pitching staffs here in Omaha. But, Jack Moss is a really interesting, very, long, lean left-handed hitter. I'm with you, Fitzy, you nailed it. I'm just going to do my mea culpa right now as we transition to Oklahoma, where, we're doing our Field of 64 several months ago, and I'm lobbying hard for Baylor. You're lobbying for North Carolina. You're lobbying for Oklahoma and A&M. And it does not feel like I fared well in that lobbying process. But you guys did defer to me, which is the worst part.
Maybe it's
you
on us then.
You could have saved me. Yeah, you could have saved me from myself.
And I'll say this about A&M too, is for coaches out there who feel like, you can't make a quick transition as a new head coach. Just look at A&M. I mean, obviously it's a really good coaching staff, but I mean, they had Dylan Rock, they had Jack Moss, they had Troy Claunch. Troy Claunch has been a huge key for them too, just from a leadership standpoint. He was actually really good defensively against Louisville, kind of cutting down that high octane offense. And it just kind of gives you an idea and kind of a framework of, like, if you hit the portal hard, like, I'm not saying you can get to Omaha the next year, but you can turn the tide pretty quickly.
Yep.
And I just want to piggyback on that last thing you said. Troy Clonch, enormous key, especially in this first game against Oklahoma, because this is the one, if I may transition, Ruse, this is the one team here that is really going to push the action on the base pass. Oklahoma loves to run. I think they're top 10 in the country in stolen bases per game. They've got speed. And they like to use it, which is not something we're going to see here otherwise a whole lot. A lot of these teams, especially when you get to Omaha, they tend to be more conservative. They don't want to risk giving up outs because outs are precious here.
Right.
But this team is going to do it. And Clonch can he can shut down a running game. He blocks really well. They're going to be aggressive on dirt ball reads, and that we saw Louisville be aggressive on dirt ball reads, and Clonch made him pay for it.
Yep. Yeah, break down Oklahoma for us, KR.
Yeah, Oklahoma, it's kind of interesting when you look at this side of the bracket with, how impactful volunteer coaches have been. We talked about Troy Tulowitzki at Texas. You look at Michael Early at A&M, and how about Reggie Willis at Oklahoma? This Oklahoma offense has been the total 180 from what the offense I saw at Shriners earlier this year. They weren't very offensive at Shriners earlier this year. They didn't have a great weekend. But if you look at the last few weeks, Kendall Pettis has been really big for them. Blake Robertson with runners in scoring positions, phenomenal. Peyton Graham's having a great year. It's kind of crazy, guys, when you look at Peyton Graham. I saw him in the hotel lobby yesterday. I'm like, how in the world, does that guy have 20 jacks? What I mean? He's just a really good hitter. I don't know. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is, but he just doesn't look like a guy with 20 jacks. But he's had a great year. And then you look at Jimmy Crooks, who from about the midseason point on has really turned things on. And so, they're very offensive. Reggie Willis has done a great job of that offense. And then pitching wise, we talked about this coming in the postseason, but they might have the most kind of starting depth of anybody. When you look at Cade Horton. You look at the option of a guy like Chaz Martinez. Jake Bennett has kind of emerged as that frontline ace that we expected out of him. David Salen's been really good. Then you have Trevin Michael on the back end, who's going to do this number all day long. They've done a really nice job with their pitching staff. So Oklahoma, for me, not to give my bracket pick away, but, man, I just feel really good about Oklahoma right now. I just feel like they hit really well with runners in scoring position. They're getting the job done on the mound. And, they're playing at a really high level. But they are kind of the team that I feel like feels a little – maybe the lights can get to them a little bit here. I don't know. Yeah,
Oklahoma feels new here. They haven't been here since 2010, but I think part of this may be just my bias because, I feel like Oklahoma from February to now is the most improved team in this field as far as the beginning of the season wasn't great for Oklahoma. They go 0-3 at Minute Maid, right? They lose a home series to New Orleans, but as they've just gotten healthier, John Spikerman gets healthy, Kendall Pettis gets healthy. Jake Bennett is a real ace on the mound. Peyton Graham. If Peyton Graham got hotter a little bit sooner, he might be one of the 3 finalists for the Golden Spikes Award. I mean, you stack his numbers up. They compete with anybody. And I think Cade Horton is a kid that we might be talking about in 10 years. We just didn't know yet. He's coming off a Tommy John surgery a year and a half ago. But this is a kid, you documented it, Kendall, when Oklahoma landed Cade Horton. I mean, he was a big-time Division I football recruit as a quarterback. When they landed him that first fall, the reports you were getting, Kendall, was program-changing recruit.
The thing that's really interesting about OU and A&M in this matchup, too, is neither team has lost a weekend series since, the beginning of April. Even at Oklahoma, if you look back at the series they lost Oklahoma State on the road in the 9th inning. I think OSU scored 5 runs in the 9th to win that, and they blew a 7-run lead against Texas. So if not for that, they wouldn't have lost a series until Shriners in February. So that's how consistent they've actually been.
And the pitching to me is really fascinating because, again, if you look at the team statistically, Oklahoma has a 5.2 ERA, which is the highest by a wide margin in this field. But I don't think that tells the story because they're pitching so much better now than they had been. Horton, what he did against Virginia Tech, really, 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 really good Virginia Tech offense at home, was really loud in a decisive third game of Super Regional. You saw it. You saw the stuff. You also saw the poise and the pitchability. But I think for them, the formula is, especially in the first game, Bennett to Michael. That's those two guys, they're capable of beating anybody. I love that combination. They did it against Virginia Tech in the first game also. And if they can go out there and take care of this A&M offense we talked so much about a moment ago in that first game to set them up, keep them in the winner's bracket, then I think all bets are off for Oklahoma.
Yeah, Trevin Michael was phenomenal.
He's nasty.
Hey, let's do our left side of the bracket picks. KR, why don't you kick us off?
I'm going to go with Oklahoma.
Fitzy?
Go with Oklahoma. I think the winner of Oklahoma A&M will win this bracket.
See, I go the other way. I think the winner of Notre Dame. I think the winner of Notre Dame, Texas wins this bracket, and I flip-flopped back and forth on this repeatedly. But in the end, I'm going to go with Texas, guys. It's maybe not the most exciting pick, but it just feels like across the board they're the most complete team.
Yeah.
I think they're a good fit here. They've been here before.
Yeah.
It's maybe it's the boring pick, the safe pick, but I'm going to go with the Longhorns to this side.
Yeah, I'm going Texas also because I'm gutless. I like a good safe pick, but I do think, and we'll see this on the other side of the bracket too. Like that's what makes this thing so fun this year is there is just no prohibitive favorite.
Yeah.
It's just this thing could go a million different ways on both sides of the bracket. These two teams are so evenly, or all these teams are so evenly matched.
I will say this too. I think Oklahoma is one of those teams out of all these clubs that if they get in the losers bracket, they have the best chance to come out of the losers bracket, just because of their starting pitching depth.
Yeah, I mean, Sandlin is the guy that we don't, he just kind of gets brushed over. It's 95 with a slider, he's good. All right, let's do the other side of the bracket. Fitzy, you kick us off with Stanford.
Incredible position player group.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's really the thing that leaps out at you. I was trying to kind of pick a star guy to focus on when we were doing our previews for this thing, and it's like, okay, Brock Jones, he's the most famous guy, right? I mean, he's going to be a first-round pick. He's a dynamic player in center field. He can throw. He can run. After a slow start, he wound up hitting 20 home runs. I mean, he is a dude. But Carter Graham has maybe had, I think, the better year statistically. This guy came out of nowhere as a sophomore now and has just put it together in his second year at this level. 22 home runs, leads the team. Up and down the lineup, though. I mean, even like the kind of the glue guys, the gritty, like defense first guys, the Adam Crampton, the Eddie Park, they're still hitting over 300.
Right.
I mean, there are no easy outs here. This team's had an incredible season, guys. I mean, to win the Pac-12 regular season and conference tournament, then they get into the postseason, to grind their way through the losers bracket at a regional, have to grind, come back from an opening loss against UConn. And here's the thing that kind of sticks out, and I don't know how to interpret this, but their starting pitching has not been good, especially last week. Their ace, the Pac-12 pitcher of the year, Alex Williams, gives up 6-7 runs in an inning and a third. Next two starters don't get out of the first inning, and still they cruise to 2 comfortable wins in the second 2 games of that series. Do they need good starting pitching? I feel like they do here. Like we got to get more than an inning. We got to get into at least the middle innings here. Yeah. So for me, it's on the one hand, it's a concern about Stanford, but on the other hand, it's like, well, maybe it doesn't matter that much. They're just that good.
Yeah.
I will say this. I think when you look at Alex Williams, you almost kind of wonder if maybe he's out of gas a little bit. I mean, he was a guy that, you could have made an argument a month ago that he's a Pac-12 pitcher of the year over Cooper Jerpy. Like Cooper Jerpy's had an amazing season, but when you looked at the conference stats, they're pretty comparable. And so
he did win it.
Oh, he did. Yeah. So I mean, he kind of ran out of gas. He's kind of run out of gas the last couple of weeks. We'll see if he can kind of recharge his batteries a little bit. But I think the big key for this has been Quinn Matthews. I mean, we talked about him after Round Rock, and he was a guy that weekend he was electric. I think he threw like 8 shutout innings and was up to 94 from the left side. I don't think he's carried 93, 94 all year long, but they kind of use him in a hybrid role. They'll start him if they need to. They'll bring him out of the bullpen for 6 or 7 innings if they need to in certain circumstances, and he's been huge for them. So like how they use him in this tournament is going to be really interesting to me as well. Like if they get in the winners bracket, do they just start him, and try to get another win, or do they just kind of say, you know what, let's try somebody else and then maybe bring him out of the bullpen? So Quinn Matthews, to me, has been kind of the X factor for this team.
Yeah, I'm with you, Fitzy. It's like I'm so confused about Stanford. I'm not confused on the position player group, right? Like it just loaded. Yeah. But I will say this, like they've been very home run dependent.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like are the Super Balls going to be the deal here, or because the super regional round was not quite as crazy as the regional round. Although, for Stanford, they did hit 9 home runs in a super regional game. So
that they lost.
Yeah, which is nuts. Yeah. So, I mean, I agree. Like the Stanford position player group is really overwhelming from a talent perspective. But I also went into this thing, like you said, Fitzy, thinking that, hey, if Stanford gets in the losers bracket, they got a big problem. Well, they got in the losers bracket twice, if you want to call going game 3 of the super regional that, and like you said, no problem. So this team is confusing, but in a good way.
Yeah. Like
they just keep figuring it out. I like that they were here last year. We mentioned that. Stanford, very interesting.
And the other thing, too, is when you look at the way they got here, they get kind of punched in the mouth against UConn, against Texas State. We were talking to SQ about it last night, but like they were down in the 9th inning. It looked like they had no shot to really come back. Texas State had all the momentum. All of a sudden, bam, 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 game over, they win. So they're going to be battle tested. They're going to be battle hardened coming into this tournament.
2 players to watch here for Stanford. You mentioned Matthews. He's the biggest weapon that they got.
He's really their best arm right now.
He's their best arm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real arm. And I kind of like him maybe as like a going back to Mississippi State 2013. Maybe you start somebody, an opener, right? Try to get you 3 innings and then let Matthews take it the rest of the way. I think that could be the formula for Stanford with Matthews. Drew Bowser, red hot. Incredible talent. He's really figured it out now. He's got 10 home runs in his last 12 games, I believe, something like that. It's this guy's on
That's
fire.
kind of what
right
we
now.
expected from him coming the year.
He was a
too.
big time, big time recruit for this team. Who's kind of gradually gotten better. Had a solid freshman year, and now he kind of had a solid most of his sophomore year. Now he's you look up, he's got 20 home runs or 18, whatever it is. It's a lot. So he's figured it out.
Everybody has 18 home runs.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we all do. I got 18.
That's right. But Drew Bowser is 6'4", 220 pounds. Like, that's a hard kid to get through the MLB draft as a high school player with infield athleticism. So, that's a great call.
Can't forget about Brady Montgomery, too. You know, the hard-hitting freshman. I think he's at 15-plus bombs.
18 also.
Yeah, exactly. So, everybody has 18 home runs.
Yeah, the Stanford position player group you're going to like. It's really an impressive group. Kendall, take us to the Hogs.
Well, I mean, this is kind of what we expected coming this season. I mean, this is a preseason number 2 team in the country, and I felt like all season long they didn't look themselves. I mean, you go back to when they played Stanford in Round Rock, they didn't look great. And I think in that game, Hagen Smith really struggled. I think he lasted. I remember being so excited to see him, and I think he lasted like 4 batters before he was taken out of the game. But you know, they've shown glimpses of turning that corner. You know, Auburn, they got 2 really close wins. They got big hits from Caden Wallace and Robert Moore in kind of that decisive game. You know, they look pretty good against LSU at home. But otherwise, it's just kind of been a roller coaster season. And, you know, we thought after the Auburn series, you're like, okay, Arkansas's back. Well, then Vanderbilt goes in there and kind of smacks them around a little bit. And so at that point, you're kind of like, well, I'm not sure what to think about the Hogs. And they go to Hoover. And frankly, and Dave Van Horn will admit this, like they were lifeless. They looked like they had nothing to play for. They had a lot to play for. They potentially had a regional host to play for. And I don't know if it was like the radio guy going to Michael Turner. I have no idea what that spark was for him. But, you know, they went to Oklahoma State, got in some, you know, just downright bar fights with the Pokes. You know, they threw some haymakers back and forth, and they win that regional. And I just thought they played an exceptionally high level at North Carolina over the weekend. It's kind of like we were talking about last night at dinner. It's like, I thought North Carolina played pretty well.
Yes.
But Arkansas just played better. And that makes them a really scary team because I kind of feel like Arkansas is finally playing like the team that was preseason number 2.
Yeah, I thought it was encouraging that they showed they could win those ugly slugfests in Stillwater and then go to Chapel Hill, another very offensive park, and win 2 low-scoring kind of pitching and defense games. So they showed they can beat you different ways. We all love their position player group, you know, which is interesting because we thought they were going to hit a lot more than they have.
Yep.
You know, statistically, they rank lower in the pack here in this Omaha field. But, I mean, if you start going down the personnel, it's like, wow, I like this guy, I like that guy. I mean, you know, Robert Moore didn't have a very good offensive year, but he still has a knack for the clutch hits. And I think Moore in battles in the middle infield is as good as it gets. Love Turner behind the plate, veteran, you know, 5th-year guy who's come up with a lot of big hits for him and also plays really good defense. How about Braden Webb in center field? You know, again, a good defender. That's why he was in the lineup last year. This year, he's become an offensive threat also. But, you know, guys on the corners, I mean, obviously, Caden Wallace is one of the best players here. That's a first round. He's going to be a first round pick as an eligible sophomore this year. He is sensational. You know, it feels like it's a really good balanced lineup with a lot of experience and Omaha experience. The key is the pitching is kind of, they figured out the right roles for everybody, right? I mean, Connor Nolan has been that steady kind of anchor for them all year long. He's the workhorse guy that they can count on. Maybe it's not the, you know, the biggest velocity. Maybe it's not the sexiest stuff, but he can get swing and misses with that big breaking ball. And then they figured it out behind that. Will McIntyre, this guy comes out of nowhere, guys.
Awesome.
I mean, he you know, all of a sudden down the stretch, he's their number 2 guy, and he's pitching great for him.
Yeah, when he came into one of the games a while back, I remember it was the A&M series. He came in the game against A&M in College Station. I'm like, who is this guy? And like I put his name in our site, and like he didn't even come up anywhere. So yeah, you know, the other guy for me is Jalen Battles. He's had some big hits in this postseason. He had that grand slam against Oklahoma State. He played really well in Chapel Hill over the weekend, so he's been great too.
Yeah, the thing about Arkansas is that defense. Even when they're struggling, the defense is so elite, and defense travels. You know, like I think they can just suffocate you with their defense. Kane Wallace, Fitzy, to me, is like, it's like that basketball player. If you watch an NBA game, like every team's got the dude that gets the ball at the end of the game. That's Kane Wallace for Arkansas, right? Like when the game gets hairy, okay, Caden's going to do something about it. And, that Stillwater regional was one for the ages. I still feel like it's one of the most incredible regionals I've ever witnessed. And I love the point you guys made about the pitching. Like Hagen Smith, who's made 14 starts, and, they've been 14 choppy starts, as freshmen are apt to do. He's now in this bullpen role where the fastball is really playing. Absolutely. I mean, it's a nasty left-handed fastball with life in the low to mid 90s. So, Arkansas, it's kind of all coming together at the right time. I still don't know what, I feel like a scorn lover with Arkansas, right? Like I'm still not 100% ready to trust the Hogs, but I'm willing to go on a date with them, I guess.
I feel like Arkansas is one of those teams that, like, they're the classic example. It's the team after the team.
Yeah.
They can win the national championship.
And let's not forget, they did go 18-12 in the SEC. Yeah. I mean, like, it's
we consider that they had a quote-unquote down year, and they still finished one game behind A&M for the SEC.
Nice. Their bullpen is a real strength here, too, guys. I mean, with Hagen Smith in that role, totally agree. He's a great fit there. And Tiger, of course, with just the electric breaking ball. And then, some veteran pieces that they can mix and match around him. Zach Morris, Evan Taylor, Cole Ramage. They've just got depth there. Mm-hmm. So even if they don't get a deep start, there gives them a little bit of margin for error.
Yeah. Fitzy, take us to Ole Miss.
This is another one that it's kind of like it took a while, but they've really figured it out. And this was a preseason top 5 team for us. Probably for a lot of people because the entire lineup was back from a really good team last year, and for a lot of the year, the numbers didn't match up with offensively with what we expected to see from this team. Mm-hmm. And in the pitching, of course, they had to really shuffle it again to find the right roles. But they looked dead at 7-14 in the SEC late in the year. At that point, it's like they got no chance, and they found a way. They kind of snuck into the field. The last team in the field was 64. And then it's just kind of that house money deal, right? They're playing like the top 5 team we thought they would be, just not quite the way we thought it would look on the mound. That's the thing, is you had to find the right pieces. Dylan DeLucia emerging as kind of, he's like their Connor Nolan, right? Like that. He's not maybe going to blow you away with his numbers or his stuff, but he got a really good slider and got enough fastball, and he gets him deep into the games routinely. He's just the steady presence they needed there. And then you put Hunter Elliott in the number 2 spot, the true freshman lefty. This guy's going to be a big star, Runes. And I think that combination has been huge for them. And then, like Arkansas, you got those 2 starters, and you got a really good bullpen behind them. Love what we've seen from Josh Mallitz, the guy that can come in there to just spin the heck out of it. And then, of course, you got Brandon Johnson behind him, who's going to come at you with heat. And that combination plus the other pieces around him, I think their bullpen is a major strength right now.
Yeah, and they've been a different team really since Kevin Graham came back. We've talked about it so many times on the podcast, before he came back. But, man, once since he's been back, like, he's had such a key leadership role. He's been productive, and that's been contagious. Peyton Chatagnier, we were talking about it last night. He was hitting around, 190 at one point this year. He's been red hot in the postseason. And Justin Bench, guys, for Ole Miss has really had a strong postseason as well. So they're getting production from 5, 6, 7 guys in offensive lineup. When you combine that with DeLucia, Hunter Elliott, and then that bullpen, they're a dangerous team in this field too. Like Ole Miss could play for a national championship, and it would not remotely surprise anybody.
Yeah. You guys know I'm a sucker for a good redemption story, and I think Ole Miss might be the redemption story of all the redemption stories here. Mike Bianco, it's taken a lot of criticism, their head coach. And, unfortunately, under Mike Bianco, Ole Miss has lost 5 game 3s of super regionals. It's one game, right? And so this is only their second, I say only, this is their second Omaha trip under Mike Bianco. And so, you nailed it, Fitzy. 7-14 with 9 games left in your SEC schedule. You're done. You're just done.
Yeah.
You got to go 7-2 just to be alive, right? Like just to be able to wake up on Selection Monday with a chance. And they pulled it off. And that offense, I'll tell you guys, Peyton Chatagnier is a really key player for me, because you said it kind of like on May 1st, he's hitting 209, which you're borderline unplayable at that point. And Mike Bianco and Mike Clement stay with him. And when Peyton Chatagnier is playing well, it's a different personality for that team. Like this kid plays with life. And so anyway, Ole Miss is very interesting.
What's interesting about Ole Miss too is, like, I was talking to a couple of committee members after Ole Miss got in, because frankly, like no one had them in the field. And their point was looking at the bubble teams, we kind of looked at teams like, hey, if they made the tournament, how far do we think they can go? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like the recurring theme in the room was we think that Ole Miss could go pretty far in the postseason. And so it's funny. It's kind of like crazy to look at college baseball. You get the 64th team in the country in Omaha, and you get the number one team in the country is now sitting at home. Crazy. So it just kind of gives you an idea of just how topsy-turvy this sport can be.
Loved your point about Peyton Chatinier. Also, Tim Elko. You've got those two guys, kind of the heart and soul guys, the veteran leadership guys. I think that really is important for this team, but also up the middle defense. Chatinier contributes to that too. Gonzalez, who's going to be a first-round pick, Jacob Gonzalez. I mean, he might be number one overall pick next year. He's that good. But him and Chatinier gives you an elite double play combination. Dunhurst behind the plate hasn't had a great year controlling the running game, which surprises me because that's really what he's known for is the arm strength. But and TJ McCants or Justin Bench, whoever winds up playing center field, because I know Bench had that, McCants had that hand injury. Mm-hmm. But the point is they've got really good athletes. It doesn't really add up when you look at their defensive numbers. They're fielding 971. And it's like, how are they not better than that? But I think they're playing a lot better defensively when it matters most.
I will say this: Tim Elko said if they just get to Omaha, they're going to win the national championship. So he made the guarantee.
He is the
captain. If he can live up to it.
And that mustache is an 80. So, Kendall, give us some takes on Auburn here.
Well, Auburn's one of those teams I saw opening weekend this year, and they went 2-1 at Globe Life, and that's kind of a precursor to their season because that weekend you're like, well, okay, I didn't see that coming because we had them picked at the bottom of the SEC West with A&M, and so the big key for them has been Joseph Gonzalez has been really solid for them. He's got a really good sinker. He just he's kind of a classic. I think it was your super regional preview I was reading. He's kind of that classic sinker guy. He's kind of an old school pitcher, and he commands his own really well. I thought Auburn was one of those teams that when Hayden Mullins went down, I was wondering about them. Like, man, I don't know if losing the Friday guy, I don't know if they can kind of respond from that. But boy, they've done a really nice job in the bullpen. Carson Skipper's been really good for them. The last month of the season, Blake Burkhalter's nasty with that 89-mile-an-hour cutter. You look at his fastball, and then offensively, I don't really consider Auburn ultra flashy offensively outside of Sonny D. But Blake Rambish has done a really nice job this year. Bobby Pierce. The list kind of goes on with those guys. And so, Auburn's one of those teams that, no, I don't think anybody's going to pick them to win the bracket. But, man, they're so scrappy. And if you can go into Corvallis and win a super regional, you can beat anybody in this field because that's a tough place to win a super.
No doubt.
Yeah, and this team is another one that's not really built around starting pitching. Its staff is built more from the back forward, more like Stanford, more like A&M.
Yeah.
But they've gotten some guys to get them into the middle innings. You mentioned Gonzalez. Certainly Mason Barnett has been a huge key for them in the postseason. Maybe not going to give you 7 innings, but he can give you 4 or 5 and then hand it over. And it's a guy that has real stuff too.
Yep.
I mean, if he gets hot and gets going, maybe you can ride him a little deeper. But I love the Skipper Burkhalter combination back there. I mean, two guys that have experience and have real stuff. I feel like that's really the key for Auburn is getting the game to their bullpen, in good shape, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that position player group is they're just winners. You've got Kason Howell, who's been around since their Omaha team in 2019. He's kind of like one of those glue guys in center field, great defender. Brody Moore, to me, in a field where you got a lot of good shortstops, you got some stars at shortstop. This guy kind of flies under the radar. He can really, really defend there. And I think him stepping into that shortstop job for Ryan Bliss this year and just being a steady presence has been a huge key for this team. And obviously Sonny DeShara, I mean, you just kind of hinted at it, but I mean, our friends at 643 Analytics released win probability added stats, and he has added more wins. I don't really understand a lot about this, but he's added more wins than anybody in the country, including Ivan Melendez, who's probably going to win the Golden Spikes Award.
Yeah, we just have to be careful letting our man Sonny D go first to third. He almost got hurt.
Yeah, that's right. We can't. We need him healthy. Yes.
One thing I was going to bring up too is we talked about the volunteer coaches on the other side of the bracket. How about the job that Tim Hudson's done? You talked about the kind of the back to front end approach with their pitching staff. The job that he's done in kind of building up those relievers. I feel like Huddy's done a really nice job with that pitching staff this year.
And Gabe's done a great job. Gabe Gross did a great job with that offense too. I mean, it's a team that really, again, a lot of mature at bats, top to bottom. I like the way that they run their team offense.
Yeah, and if people that haven't really gotten into Auburn yet or seen this team, Sonny DeShara, you're going to love. Transfer from Stanford, listed at 6 foot, 265. maybe that's what he is. I don't know, but he's a baller. This kid's a great player, so physical. It's powered all fields. It's the at-bats he runs are incredible. He may lead the country in on-base percentage.
He does. 591, I think.
What's
crazy.
What's funny at Globe Life opening weekend is he steps in the box and you're kind of like, okay, this is interesting. He had like a home run, and then all of a sudden the next at bat, you're like, wait, this guy's actually a really good hitter. He's not just a masher. And so it's just kind of interesting too in college baseball this year how many guys have transferred to bigger programs and actually done a much better job. Because, he hit for power at Stanford last year, but I think he also, his batting average is like 270, but he's having an All-American type of season this year, clearly.
Yeah, skinny jeans, you're out, Sonny D is in. And I'll say this one more thing about their bullpen. Think about game planning for Auburn. Carson Skipper and Burkhalter stuff is, not only is it like turbo stuff, but it's unusual. Skipper's got that big old breaking ball and that downhill fastball, and then Burkhalter is like turbo fastball with, I don't know what we're calling it, a cutter. And so if you don't have a lead on Auburn in like the fifth inning, you're starting to get very anxious in the other dugout. So, all right, let's pick our side of the bracket. Fitzy, who are you going over with over here?
Guys, I like the Ole Miss Rebels.
Oh, wow. Yes.
For me, this team is it's Virginia of 2015. It's Oregon State of 2007. That team that sneaks into the field at the end, but really, it's a team that is just kind of lived up to what we thought they would be in the preseason. It's just, again, top 5 team that's now playing like it. They got nothing to lose. They're a team that nobody thought would even be here. And it just feels like it's all come together for them. And the bullpen for me, as well as just those top 2 starters, that was the piece I was waiting to see, and they figured it out.
I think he was swayed by the Tim Elko guarantee.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to go with Arkansas. I just think when you look at the way the Hogs played last weekend, I thought that Oklahoma State weekend was kind of a tie turner for them. They're playing elite level. I like the Hogs.
I'm going to go Stanford. I'm really skeptical of this team, and I'm picking them, which I think just tells you everything you need to know about. This is going to be a really fun College World Series because, I think this could go a million different ways. It reminds me a little bit of the 2016 College World Series where Coastal shows up for the first time and just wins the dang thing. So this is going to be really, really fun. So, all right, well done, boys. I want to say thanks again to our friends at Wilson for hosting us here today. The Omaha experience in the baseball village. What do you got?
Are we not going to make a national champion pick? We're going to go all this way and we're going to pick it all?
CG, should we do the whole thing?
Come on,
man. All right. So Fitzy, go ahead. Do it.
Give me the Rebels. Toddy.
Love it.
I'm going to go with Arkansas.
Okay, gosh, what am I doing? I'm picking, give me the horns, Texas. I'll pick Texas. Yeah, there you go.
Somebody from the SEC or in the future SEC.
Yeah, the futuristic SEC, the Star Trek SEC. So that was good. So again, thanks again to our friends at Wilson. I want to encourage everyone that's here in Omaha, check out this Omaha experience over in the baseball village. You should probably allocate 2 days to come over here. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of great swag to purchase. And we also want to thank our friends at Hurrdat Sports for producing this CWS preview show. Be on the lookout for interviews and content, including their new CWS podcast, Bat Flips and Party Tips with Anna Bellinghausen and Andrew Rogers, as D1Baseball and Hurrdat Sports collab for the next 12 days in Omaha. So we appreciate it. Everyone enjoy Omaha, and we will talk to you soon.